I think the first challenge that I had to overcome was denial because I had this belief that I'm a strong and independent woman and I've got a good job and I've got all the friends and I'm living the high life, living abroad, expat life. I don't need anybody. I'm fine by myself. But there was something inside where I started to realize that, okay, I think I have some kind of mild low level depression. But deep down inside, it suddenly hit me like I'm lonely. And that's when I realized I feel really lonely and I want to share my life with somebody. What is the point in doing all of this if I don't have that special person to share it with? So I think that's when the door started to open. Some women, they think like, I'm a strong, independent woman, so I want to meet a man who is my equal or he will follow my lead. But they'll meet that kind of man and it doesn't work out. Actually, they want to be with a more masculine man who leads and they do want to follow. Because actually, they're so busy being strong and independent in their jobs that they want to actually be led. I don't necessarily think that everybody has one and only one soulmate because we evolve through our human life. That's why so many of us have relationship problems because we're operating from our conditioning. When if we look at the world and what's possible, there are no actual rules. We just grow up with these rules and we adopt them and we think like, okay, like that's what I know, that's what I'll go with. If you're not feeling great in yourself, stop fighting it by trying to find something outside of yourself to make yourself feel better. Ooh, that's a good question.
The following podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Audience discretion is advised. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of The Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. I'm your host, Zach, the Health King. I have a very, very interesting and special guest with me today. It is her very first podcast, and I am honored to have her on as a guest. She is a life coach that currently focuses on helping women who are successful in other areas of their life become successful in love. She blends spirituality, manifestation, and mindset to help them achieve this, as she believes true love starts from within. That is a Miss Lauren Kent. Lauren, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Lovely to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so let's start right from the beginning, as you've named it. Love starts from within. What does that mean to you?
So for me, the reason why I do this is because it was a real challenge of mine for a really long time. And I did everything and anything that I could to try and find love and to find that person and to kind of almost to convince them to like me. So it would be things like, trying to dress the right way and do my hair in the right way or say the right thing or act in the right way. And, I never got anywhere because that ultimately leads you to attracting the wrong kind of person because you're attracting somebody who thinks you're one way, but the reality is you're presenting yourself in a completely different way to who you are. But the reason I was doing that, because there was a disconnect between how I was feeling about myself on the inside, which was not a lot of love for myself. And although I didn't realize it at the time, because everything felt, or it seemed to be really good on paper, like I had a really good job, a really good group of friends, a really active social life. I was living abroad, so having the time of my life. But inside, actually, my self-esteem was quite low, and it was just masked by this kind of facade of confidence. And not that it was all a facade, like I am a confident person, but at that point, I really did have low self-esteem. And what I came to realize that it was something going on inside in my mindset and in how I felt about myself. That was the real barrier to finding love. So when I started to work on finding love from within, this is when I started to see changes in my relationships and in the quality of people that I was starting to attract and go on dates with.
Yeah, people are so complex as individuals. And I'll always say when both pillars of a relationship or both parts of a relationship aren't entering that relationship from a foundationally healthy place, well, how can that house of a relationship that's built upon that foundation and those pillars ever exist in a healthy way in the long term? It's only a matter of time before the ground shakes and it kind of crumbles. And that's why it is essential for someone to do that inner healing work have a good relationship with themselves if they've ever have ambitions of having a good relationship with other people at all,
Mm,
in a romantic or otherwise sense, I'd say.
mm,
And so, would you like to share about what kind of things got you to being in an unhealthy state of inner love? And
mm,
what were the kind of factors that played into getting to that place that you had to come out of? Because a lot of
mm.
people, I think, are experiencing a disconnection from their inner love, and then they might relate in their experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I just love your analogy of the house. I think that's perfect. And it's one that I use myself as well, because I think, and I'll come back to your question in a second, but I think a lot of people think, they've got this house, maybe the foundation isn't quite right. Maybe there are cracks in the walls that really need looking at. And a lot of people do, they think, like, okay, if I just decorate it, I'll just paint it and I'll put some wallpaper up and I'll make it look really nice and everything will be fine. And it is fine for a while, but it's only a matter of time before the cracks start to show and the foundation starts to rock. And then, and people have experienced this where a relationship has gone really wrong and it really feels like you're just left with a big pile of rubble and you have to pick yourself up, rebuild yourself from the ground up. And that's when you find that relationship that does work. And usually with somebody that's been through that process as well of really looking inside and resolving things on that deep level. Um, but in terms of where the cracks came from, yeah, I think a lot of different places potentially. I think for most people, it starts in childhood for sure. It's our childhood conditioning where we learn certain things about ourselves and about the way love and relationships work. So I really think that comes from three key areas. So it's the things that we hear about ourselves, the things that we hear about, the way that relationships work, or the way that the opposite sex is, or same sex as well. Because as a kid, you don't really have the critical thinking skills to kind of separate, what is actually fact and what is true, and what is this, that my parents are just saying this. So it can be things like, I remember my mom. So when my mom would have her friends over, they're pretty much bad mouthing my dad and my friend's husband. So it'd be like, I remember them saying to me all the time, like, Lauren, just stay single, don't get married, relationships, they're more hassle than they're worth. And they're kind of saying it half in jest or from their personal issues that they have. But as a kid, you take these things to heart and you think, like, okay, well, it's my mom. Like, she's always been right about everything else before. Why wouldn't I believe what she has to say? So I think for a long time I grew up and I really kind of believed this. And I really had this belief that I was better off alone, safer, that a relationship wasn't really worth the hassle. And on a subconscious level, I would make it so that it was true. I would start to date somebody where we would have a really challenging relationship. So it felt really difficult and it felt like this isn't worth it. I'm better off just being single. My mom was right. And this is part of doing that inner work where you're really challenging that belief. Is it really true that all men are not worth the hassle? Because that absolutely isn't true at all. So many good men out there, including my soulmate Dave. Like, he's just absolutely wonderful. And a lot of men I know are.
Yeah, it's such an unfortunate cycle of bitter women poisoning the minds of innocent young girls because they've had a bad experience. And it's an interesting kind of thing to analyze. Where does it come from? Why are these women so bitter or so like nasty towards their men? Is it their fault and they're just nasty, or have the men in their life failed
Mm,
them so much that they have become this way? But also, did they choose poorly in the men that they
mm,
involved themselves with? So then there's a responsibility back on them to begin with.
mm.
I think there's a lot of factors going on, right? Because if that
Absolutely.
woman chose a good man to begin with, then she probably wouldn't have had these experiences that have led her feel such a way. And it is so unfortunate. There's the unconscious bit that mothers or older women kind of play out these internal feelings that they've developed of resentment and spew that out. But then there's also perhaps sometimes where older women or mothers even sabotage their young daughters or the younger women because they can't stand the sense that, like, so sometimes it might be like a completely uncaring thing or just unconscious thing, but other times it might be like a subconscious, like, competition thing. Oh, I didn't get this, so nobody else can
Mhm.
either. There's a lot going on, and we could
Mhm.
dive into that as much or as little as you
Mhm.
like. But yeah, it's very unfortunate to see women ruining other women's chance of love through
Mhm.
programming such unhealthy behaviors into them. And one of the
Oh,
most unhealthy behaviors is the bad mouthing of men as a whole,
mhm.
but also men specifically.
Mhm.
I don't think a woman should ever go in public and start specifically bad mouthing her man, even
Mhm.
if they're experiencing problems. There's a difference between constructively leaning on your sisters or your community
Mhm.
and just blurting out bad mouthing stuff.
Mhm.
I think there's no place for that and no place where that's healthy ever. And it's crazy how much that's been normalized.
Totally, absolutely, I agree. And just to say, it's not just women, that men will do it too. Like my dad badmouths my mum and women. So it's just unhealthy attitudes all around.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I teach, once people have found that they've got that healthy and loving relationships, one of the golden rules is you don't talk about your relationship problems to your friends. If you genuinely have a problem in your relationship, you work it out with your partner or you get professional help, because it's so easy to fall into that trap of you're with your girlfriend, so you're going to sit and complain about men, and it becomes so general that it even stops being about the problem. And the same with men, to generalize and to talk about, women, they're all a bunch of bitches, which isn't true. There's something deeper that needs to be resolved, and friends can be a great, pillar of support. But if they're not experts in this area, they'll suck you into their past experiences and their personal problems, and then it can really start to spiral down. And that's not good for anybody.
That's true. So there's the element of, hey, it's probably best to resolve this in-house. But
Hmm.
if you are going to consult with others, even in a trying to be healthy way,
Yeah.
very much consider who you're consulting with. Because if they don't have healthy relationship experience, well, what good are they even going to be to you? They're just going to compound with their own version of nonsense behavior. And so that's a very, very good point you raise as well. And so there's obviously a lot of factors that have gone into creating an unhealthy environment in someone's internal self in regards to their understanding of love externally or internally. But I'm interested because we were talking about your experience.
Mm.
What allowed you or kind of inspired you, or how did you kind of break out of whatever unhealthy behaviors or habits or inner thoughts kind of?
Mm. Yeah, good question. So it was really, I think the first challenge that I had to overcome was denial, because I had this belief that I'm a strong and independent woman, and I've got a good job and I've got all the friends, and and I'm living the high life, living abroad, expat life. I don't need anybody. I'm fine by myself. I'm busy doing XYZ. And it just reached a point where I was working at a university in Edinburgh one summer, and on paper, everything was great. I was working at a really reputable university. They were paying for my accommodation there. It was Edinburgh Fringe Festival. That summer in particular, the weather was lovely. I had friends and family come to visit me at the weekend. But there was something inside where I started to realize that, okay, I think I have some kind of mild low level depression. And I had a holiday booked to go to Croatia for a yoga retreat. And again, it should have been something, to be really excited about. But deep down inside, it suddenly hit me like I'm lonely. And that's when I realized I feel really lonely and I want to share my life with somebody. What is the point in doing all of this if I don't have that special person to share it with? So I think that's when the door started to open, like, okay, you really need to have a look at what is really stopping you from having that healthy relationship. Another thing that really helped was I was reading a book about money mindset. And as I was reading it, like my brain was just translating it, not from one language to another, but instead of talking about money and finances, it was just reading it as love and relationships. And I was like, oh my God. And it kind of awoke something in me. And I was like, this is it. This is not to my finances, but this is what's going on with my love life and my relationships and my attitudes to love. And something shifted.
Yeah, it's interesting how all things are fractal, all things relate to each other. And
Mm,
it's interesting how different tools can be used and interpreted by our brain and applied to perhaps where we need them to be and where we need to work on. But yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that phrase, strong, independent woman.
mm,
Because that's kind of a scam, isn't it? That's kind of
mhm,
a scam religion that a lot of women have been indoctrinated into, and that
mhm,
they live that as their kind of guiding force or guiding kind of persona. And on the surface, it sounds quite nice. On
mm,
the surface, it sounds very nice.
mhm,
But then a woman kind of goes down that path or down that life philosophy
mm,
and often find themselves years later, hopefully sooner rather than later,
mm,
realizing just how miserable a guiding force or guiding light that is, or false path that
mhm,
is. And when there's any sort of pushback on that phrase, it gets hit with the terms, misogyny, this, you don't want
mhm,
women to be independent. No. But
mhm,
I think trying to be such an independent woman
mm,
leaves out the core part of the beauty of being a woman and the beauty of a female's experience in having great loving relationships or relationship
mm,
ideally with a man that
mm,
takes care of you and cares for you and then kind of protects your femininity in that way.
mm,
Is there anything you'd like to touch upon with that kind of scam? Because you said
mm.
you kind of went down that route, and why is it that so many women are going that route, and is there a way for it to be done healthily? What do you think?
So I think it's not for me to say what is right or wrong for another person and what is healthy or not. I think, for whoever's listening to this, it will touch something inside if they kind of realize that actually maybe. So, for example, some women, they think like, like I've got the great job, I've got the great social circle, I've got the family, like a relationship would be the icing on the cake. But then the question sometimes that you have to ask is, are you really that happy with your life that you need this? Because when you are in that committed relationship that's really loving and really healthy, it isn't that kind of Hollywood relationship where it's all romance and flowers and let's, have a weekend in Paris. It's we need to do that weekly shopping. We need to work out that rhythm where we're going to cook and who does this job and who does that. And you get into the mundane, and that really is what it's about, which is what you're doing anyway. But there's almost this sense that if I can convince myself that it's about being strong and independent and it looks a certain way, that this is what's going to bring me happiness. But when I dig beneath the surface, actually, yeah, I don't really know what I'm saying with that. Can I, is that a bit we can edit out and start that question
No
again?
worries, no worries at all.
Um,
I think it. I think we could keep that in if you'd be okay with that, because I think you said a key thing there in that a lot of women, or I guess people in general,
mm,
but let's talk about women. I think a lot of women, especially those that have this hard-headed, strong, independent woman
mm,
mind frame, they look at a relationship as, like you said, icing on top.
mm,
And then when that icing perhaps isn't the sweetest thing in the world every moment of the day
mm,
and every second of the day, and it's not
mm,
their idealized perfect thing,
yeah,
then they either get turned off entirely or they throw it
mm,
all away or they don't want to compromise on this strong independent woman persona
yeah,
at all. And I
mm,
think that blockage prevents them from experiencing, again, the full beauty that is a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like that blockage there of an idealizing, fantasized relationship versus, like you were saying, the reality
Mm-hmm.
of what a good relationship is. It's not just the icing, it's got to be
Mm-hmm.
a layer of the cake itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. And I think one really important mindset shift is to start thinking of both. Like you can still be strong and independent and have a really loving relationship. You can still be strong, but within your, I mean, so one interesting thing that I read a while ago that was really helpful for me is, so one thing that really helped me to manifest my partner was I had a script. And there were two scripts. So the first script is, really contemplating the qualities that you want to experience in a relationship. And it's things like mutual trust and freedom and respect, and the idea that you don't want to make your partner over and they don't want to make you over either. So you're very much coming into the relationship as yourself, accepting and being accepted. And there's a second script because sometimes the first script doesn't work for some people. And the reason is because some women, they think like, I'm a strong, independent woman. So I want to meet a man who is my equal or he will follow my lead. But they'll meet that kind of man and it doesn't work out. And the reason is because for some women, it isn't what they really want to experience. Actually, they want to be with a more masculine man who leads and they do want to follow because actually they're so busy being strong and independent in their jobs that they want to actually be led. So the second script is about I'm happy to follow where my partner leads. And actually, I read both of them when I was doing this process. And this is what I love about my relationship is that I can get home and I can just relax outside of my business and outside of coaching where I'm always leading people, that he can lead me and he can say, come on, like we're going to do things this way and he can look after me. And I think this is why our relationship works so well because I'm so receptive to his love and to the way that he loves as well. And it's in alignment with the reality of how I really want to be loved. I don't want to have to be the strong one all the time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that's the inherent polarity of a male and a female, right? Men are natural leaders, women are the receivers, the natural receivers. And that has such a bad rap, and people get so caught up and went in a tizzy about it. But I think the more a woman connects with her natural tendencies and her natural femininity and really is connected with what is bringing her happiness, I think the
Mm,
majority of women would find themselves the happiest if they found a good man that's
mm,
able and capable and willing to lead and guide her and
mm,
surrender to that and submit to that. And that doesn't mean that that woman is not then herself a sovereign individual, a
mm,
full-blown adult person making her own choices. It's
mhm,
just leaning into her experience of, okay, I don't want to do all these things. I don't want to be here, be the hard masculine figure.
mhm,
So I will allow you, my loving man, husband,
mm,
whatever, to guide me in those appropriate ways. I'm
mm,
trusting you to take care of me. Please
mhm,
don't abuse that. Please do so
mhm,
well. I will continually assess if that's being done properly.
mhm,
And in that way, people have such a crazy spin on how they think of submission or that male female dynamic where the man is the clear leader in that it's anti-woman or it's
mhm,
it's for the man, but really in a natural male female relationship dynamic of the male's the leader and the woman is the receiver. It's kind of like the man is in that way serving the woman. To lead in a relationship is to serve. Now,
mm,
obviously, this gets muddy when a lot of people go about relationship dynamics in an unhealthy way, and perhaps a lot of men that are more strong figures, sometimes they do abuse that power.
mm,
But that doesn't mean that that dynamic isn't the still the natural and most optimal dynamic.
Mm,
But I think a lot of people get caught up in the definition of independent, right?
mm,
People get caught up with that persona, like we were saying, and independent doesn't mean that you have to be entirely separated. Can mean like you can still be independent in the sense that you are a functioning adult. You can still
mm,
feed yourself, clothe
mm,
yourself, think for
mhm,
yourself, while also submitting to a natural and loving role in a
mhm,
relationship.
mhm,
And so,
mm.
what do you think is the natural, perhaps, or most optimal role for a woman in a relationship and how they can show up?
Mm. I mean, I don't think I can answer that again because I don't think there's a one glove fits all. I think as humans, we really love to try and pigeonhole things into this side or this side. Um, it depends on the individual because I don't, like you get some women who will have more masculine tendencies and you'll get men that have more feminine tendencies, and they can be a really good match together as well. So I can really only speak for myself and for what seems to be true with my clients as well. Just remind me of your specific question again.
It's like, what is the
Oh, the
role?
optimal dynamic.
Yeah, the optimal dynamic,
Mhm.
or the role for a woman to play in a relationship. And then I'll ask you the same question for a man as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll answer for both men and women. It's mutual trust, mutual freedom, and mutual respect. So that's mutual trust. It's so powerful because so many people they get so jealous, they get so caught up in the past that they lose trust with themselves and with their partner. That causes so many problems down the line where one person can't go out with their friends because their partner doesn't like it. I was speaking to a lady and she's divorced now, but she's on her own because she got lost in that relationship to a controlling partner who didn't trust her to go and have her own life with her own friends. So when I think of me and my partner Dave, we both trust each other so much. One of his closest friends is a woman. But for me, I'm not threatened by this at all because I'm so confident in myself and our love for each other that that's not a problem. And he trusts me equally in return. Mutual freedom means each of us are free to do whatever we want. It just so happens that we love doing most things together. But if I wanted to go on, a weekend holiday by myself, I have the freedom to do this without being made to feel guilty about this. And the same for him. If he wanted to go and have a few days on his own, which he never would, but if he did, he's got the freedom to do this as his own person. And the mutual respect, it's the respect for how he is as a person, who I am as a person, and what we each bring to the table, our own unique qualities. So it's interesting because when you use the word, submit earlier, I don't think I wouldn't personally put it as a woman submitting to a man. I think it's more acceptance of how we are. Because there are ways where there are times when he leads and he's the strong one. And maybe that's in a more masculine way, but there are times when I am strong and I'm leading him, but maybe with the more what is seen to be as more feminine things. So like he's a very emotional person, but for me as a woman, I think I can really lead him towards processing and making sense of these emotions and turning them into action. Whereas his strengths can be that kind of real, like objective problem solving. Okay, we've got this problem here. Yes, we know there are emotions attached to it, but here's X, Y, Z that you could do. So in that way, we both have strengths. We both lead one another, but with respect for when it's needed and when it's not needed, which is, yeah, it takes a lot of negotiating to get to that point.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point because obviously there are certain tasks and certain elements of life that do require more masculine or feminine energy to kind of
Mm,
achieve that thing in its best form. And so, absolutely. Well, there's no, things are fluid, aren't they?
mhm,
And when we say, okay, this one's the leader, that one's the leader, I think the only way to go about the day to day healthily is okay, for this task, you are the kind of leader here. For this
mhm,
task, you are the leader here. That's a
mhm,
different thing than
mm,
kind of like an overall
mm,
dynamic. But this is a hot topic of lately that you touched upon, and so I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit
Mm,
here. In that you mentioned the concept of freedom,
mhm,
and for yourself and for the other person that you mentioned that ended up getting a divorce, I think, in the concept of going out with the girls.
mhm,
Now, it's a very broad stroke to say I should be able to do that. It's
mhm,
also a very broad stroke to paint a picture like a woman should never do that.
mhm,
Perhaps is there some nuance to that conversation? Now, from a man's perspective, if I were in a relationship with a woman
mm,
and that woman had friends that I believed were very unhealthy influences,
mhm,
and those other friends were going out to a somewhere that I think was unsafe or could create a dangerous scenario or would
mm,
have a lot of just unhealthy behaviors that I think would be
mm,
detrimental to the
mhm,
woman I was with,
mhm,
I would advocate for that woman to not go.
mm,
And I think that is perhaps the role of a man as a protector and a provider to give that advisement and to give that guidance and to have that say, hey,
mm,
I don't think that's a good idea. I'd prefer if you didn't do that.
mhm,
Obviously, every individual is a sovereign individual.
mm,
And so there's a big difference between having a dislike of, hey, please don't do that, or I don't want you to do
mhm,
that, and obviously locking someone down and saying, no, you are
mm,
not allowed or not able to. But I
mm,
would hope that a woman that I was with would recognize my advisement and my logic and my
mm,
comprehension of the world
mm,
in a way
mhm,
that she would consider perhaps participating in more healthy behaviors.
mm,
What's your thought on any of that nuance there?
mm. I would ask you why you're dating that kind of woman in the first place.
That's a good question. That's a good
Because
question.
it comes from you, it comes from within, and there would be some level for a lot of people, because this is the thing where we try to pigeonhole people into two camps, like, feminine, masculine. But within those two categories, we're all operating from different levels of consciousness. And like you said, it's fluid. There are times when we'll be very awake, and I mean awakened as in enlightened, and there'll be times where we're sleeping and dreaming our way through life on autopilot, living in a really habitual way based on our conditioning from childhood. So if that were the case with you, what I would want to know is why you're drawn to a woman with unhealthy habit patterns, and what it is about you that would not be more drawn to somebody who is living in a healthy way that feels right for you and in alignment with you.
That's a great point. Absolutely. And this was an entire hypothetical that I just placed
Sure.
myself. But yeah, that raises an interesting part of the conversation in that people will get a partner as a
Mhm.
man or as a woman, and then often try to impose their ideals upon that person who doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't work, and it causes a clash, and nobody has a good time.
Do
Nobody.
you know what I say, Zach? I say, if this happens, I say it's like trying to buy milk from the hardware store. It just doesn't work. Go to the supermarket, go to Walmart to get your milk.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's going to end in tears.
fair point. That's a great point because yes, people will get someone for maybe one attribute that they like,
Hmm.
ignore everything else about them, and then be upset when you know you get what you get. I
Hmm.
always say in a various regards, not just in relationships, you can't go to a circus and be upset that you see clowns.
Exactly. Exactly right. It's just anything else is insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great point. And I that goes back to my kind of overall theme that I always purport that everything that you experience is your fault.
How do you
Everything
mean?
in the sense that say you are you're an individual, you're in a
Hmm.
relationship,
Hmm.
your partner is at least in your perception acting out of line or
Okay.
not being well or this and that and the other.
Hmm.
It's easy to say, well, they're being that way, they're being that way,
Yes.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
No, no, no. It's your fault. You picked that
Mm.
person.
Yeah.
and are continuing to want to be with that person who is acting all these ways and bringing this to you.
Hmm.
That's your fault. And
Yeah.
that sounds like some people might say victim blaming, but to me,
Hmm.
that's an empowered
Hmm.
position.
Yeah.
That's an empowered position.
I would probably personally change the word from fault to responsibility. So I would absolutely, just because I think it's a more positive word, but
Sure.
absolutely, it's your responsibility to look at yourself and to take responsibility for your role in the situation. And if your role is being with that person, then it's about looking within you. Well, what is it within me that is attracted to this? What am I playing out from my childhood that is showing up in my adult life relationships? So yeah, totally. Look at your side of the street, take responsibility before you start pointing fingers, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so many people seem so unable to do that, and it's much easier to cast stones
And
without.
they get angry if you start saying, well, what is it about you? It's not me, it's them. How dare you? And anger is usually not really anger, it's a defense mechanism deflecting away from the truth. But it's the truth that will set you free. So I think more and more people are starting to realize this, but definitely a lot of people have got a way to go.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. You mentioned a term before, a term that gets used a lot, a term that gets perhaps even misused or misapplied. And so I'm
Mm,
curious what your concept is of the word soulmate. What does that
mm,
mean to be someone's soulmate?
mm. It's a good question. I think I am a spiritual person. I think it's a spectrum, and I think I'm not at the very extreme side of being spiritual. I think sometimes people talk about things that I personally haven't experienced and I can't connect with. And it's this idea of, for example, like past lives. Some people, they really connect with their past lives. I don't have an experience of this. So I feel like I can't comment on this. So, soulmate, if this means that there is only one soul in the entire universe and that ball of energy is connected to you and only you, I don't know if I can say that's true. For me, a soulmate is the person who is right for you and good for you in a healthy and loving way, on a similar wavelength to you. So that means a similar level of consciousness, and somebody who is going to kind of reflect back to you who you are and that opportunity for you to grow as a person, as a spiritual being as well. And I don't necessarily think that everybody has one and only one soulmate, because we evolve through our human life. So I use the example, for example, Pierce Brosnan. So when he was younger, he was Pierce Brosnan, 007, James
Oh,
Bond.
oh, okay. I
Yeah.
know James Bond. I don't know Pierce Brosnan. Is he
Okay.
the actor?
He's an actor. He played James Bond in the 90s, maybe early noughties. Anyway, so he was married and he had a really happy marriage with this lady, and she sadly passed away. They were married for about 10 years. She passed away. I guess he had a few years kind of healing and getting over this. And then he met his current wife. They'd been married for like 25, maybe 30 years, and are very much in love. So I don't think for him that he had just one soulmate. I think he had a soulmate and she passed away. He had that time to heal. And then he had his other soulmate. And I think it shows for him that he has a loving and healthy mindset that allows him to have these loving and healthy relationships with women that he grows with, as he gets older.
Yeah, I think that's a very digestible and realistic and sensible definition of a term that's used in a lot of silly ways as well.
Mm,
Because I think what you're saying is that when we meet someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that it had to be that person,
mm,
that our soul is just kind of at a good resonant frequency to
mm,
mate with and to mesh with and to
mm,
kind of experience this existence together with.
mm,
Then that person is your kind of a good mate. It's a good
mm,
soul mate for that.
mm,
So yeah, I think that's a term that people get a little turned off from.
mm,
Understandably so. People are out there using
mm.
it all crazy,
Yeah,
having a new soulmate every other week. But
yeah. Because
Yeah.
I get asked, some people are like, is there only one soulmate? And I think, because some people they felt they've already met their soulmate, maybe, they got divorced or maybe their soulmate passed away. And I don't want anybody to have that fear that there's nobody else out for them or that there's only ever one person out there for you, because there are so many good people in the world and so many good people looking for love that want the same thing as you. So I think there are many opportunities for soulmate connection.
Do you think a man or a woman, separate
Yeah.
questions, or they might have the same answer, can
Mhm.
have multiple soulmates concurrently?
Well, that's a good question because I was thinking the other day, aren't we technically all soulmates? I mean, we are all souls. We are all interacting in this on like if you think on the plane of energy that we're just beings of atoms and particles all vibrating around, we're all interacting with each other. Like we could be soulmates on a level because we are two souls. We're interacting right now. I don't know. I really don't know on the energy level. Could your, really good friend be a soulmate as well? Maybe. But then it comes down to that definition. Nothing has any meaning except for the meaning we give it. So maybe it's for each person to define what is a soulmate for them. What does that mean for you in your life and in your romantic relationships? Because for me, a soulmate is a romantic connection. So in that way, we couldn't be soulmates. We might be two souls, hanging about being friends. But for me and Dave, my partner, I consider him very much to be my soulmate because we're on the same wavelength, where I would say similar levels of consciousness, where, we're looking to evolve beyond this. We're very physically attracted to each other as well. So there's that level as well. So it's very much a relationship for two. Whereas with friendships, there's, I want to be close friends with a lot of people. I have a lot of close friends, but there's something about our relationship that feels really special and unique. And for me, that's my definition of a soulmate.
Interesting. And I would challenge it just for the sake of interesting conversation
Yeah.
in that you assumedly or apparently have grown up, of course, in Western culture
Yeah.
where two is the standard and it's actually the only really socially accepted
Mm,
thing. Whereas other cultures, perhaps there's more involved.
mhm,
And I'm not necessarily saying my thoughts on the matter,
mm,
but I think there are cultures out there, or know that there are cultures out
mm,
there where perhaps there's a house of a man with
mm,
multiple
mm,
soulmate women
mhm,
and live in a very loving relationship, true and endearing with
mm,
all of those women concurrently, and all of those
mm,
women are tied very energetically and romantically and in
mm,
love with that man. And then the women sometimes themselves have a very good relationship, and it's kind of like a big, is that a house of soulmates
mm,
that we're all meant to be together?
mm.
It's interesting how our concepts are shaped by the culture that we live within, and kind of how that plays out.
Exactly. And that's why so many of us have relationship problems because we're operating from our conditioning. When if we look at the world and what's possible, there are no actual rules. We just grow up with these rules and we adopt them and we think like, okay, like that's what I know, that's what I'll go with. I'll share an interesting story. I was volunteering at a theatre a couple of years ago, and I was talking to a lady. She was the costume designer, and she was a lesbian. So I was very surprised when she started talking about her boyfriends. And not boyfriend, boyfriends. And I was like, hang on a second. And I just said to her, I said, I hope it's okay to ask you about this, but you were mentioning earlier that you were a lesbian, and I'm just really curious to know more about this. And please tell me to mind my own business if you'd rather not talk about it. But she was so open and she was really happy to talk about this. And basically, she'd been in a relationship with a woman and it hadn't worked out. And she was totally heartbroken. She had a really good relationship with one of her gay best friends who was in a relationship with his partner, boyfriend. And the conversation went something like, us two were really happy and in love together. Why don't you join our unit, our family unit? Come and live with us. We'll three of us be in a relationship together. We'll love each other, care for each other, have each other's backs. It wasn't sexual. So it was really, I'm not sure exactly what makes it different between a close friendship or roommates or housemates. But for what she was saying is that those three were in a relationship together. So it doesn't, I don't fully understand it, but it just shows that anything is possible if you want it to be and you say it is.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like she's straight with some extra steps in there, you know?
Well, no, because she wasn't sleeping with these men. So she actually is attracted to women. Those two are both attracted to men and in a relationship with each other, but they decided to form a trio
Yeah.
to love each other, to show affection and kindness, and take care of each other when they're sick, and share out the household chores and that kind of thing. So on so many levels it works, much like maybe one man in kind of a Middle Eastern country with many wives, they can all provide support and love and affection to one another in different ways. So maybe it's just another way that we've not explored yet. I don't know.
Yeah. We all need a tribe in some sort of way, right? We're social creatures. We're not meant to be lone wolves out here. I think part of the human experience is romantic or otherwise, just having
Mm,
people, like you said, that have your back and look out for you and are there to just support you and have that, healthy structure that you kind of vibe with. And like, hey, we're into these same kind of things. We love each other, whatever that means. And I think when people have been so disconnected, unfortunately, from their biological family units, because
mm,
the average state of the biological family unit is so unhealthy for all the
mm,
different reasons that it is, people will gravitate towards arrangements like that,
mm,
maybe even separate from their romantic life in order
mm,
to have that and feel that. It's kind of like a surrogate family because
mm,
we all kind of need that. And that's kind of a built-in structure that we are meant to have some sort of way of,
mm,
and when that void is there, we fill it hopefully with something healthy. Now that sounds like a healthy example of
mm,
filling that void in a
mm,
way. But I think unfortunately a lot of people fill that void for community in an
mm,
unhealthy way. They'll kind of
mm,
grab the first semblance of where they feel accepted and then just
mm,
dive into that. And that looks like a lot of different things for different people.
mm. I guess that's one reason why cults are so popular, because you see somebody who's
Yeah.
low and they're vulnerable and they very much just want connection. And, come to us, we will offer you everything that you've been longing for, which is respect, inclusion, making you feel special, wanted, part of the tribe. Um, yeah, so yeah, it's a really good point. Are they a tribe? Are they a family? Just with an extra step of commitment? I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. Suppose only they know. Perhaps not even they know. Who knows?
Well, because another thing is, though, is it an avoidance on her part of, in terms of her romantic relationships? Has she got challenges forming healthy romantic relationships that it's almost a way of, well, I don't want to open this kind of worm, so let's do something totally different and see what happens? Mm.
Perhaps it's a good point. Perhaps it is some sort of avoided behavior of not doing the actual work to secure it. So this is a substitution that kind of
Mm,
fills some of those needs that she has without doing it. And again, perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't, perhaps it
mm,
isn't for her, but it is for other people. Is yeah, that's an interesting point that you raised for sure, for sure. Because when we have that romantic relationship, then it becomes more work. It's kind of more stress-free, carefree for her
mm,
to perhaps live with these gentlemen. She doesn't have to hold up her end of the deal that she would be kind of obligated to, but kind of the natural expectations
mm,
of having her stuff together to be able to present healthily in the more
mm,
official communion, um, she can kind of just chill and do her thing and
Mm,
kind of tag along with them. Um,
yeah.
whatever the case is, I wish her the best.
Yeah, same.
In that instance, or in that kind of light, can someone that so we've established that a relationship can only exist healthily in the long term with two pillars of a foundation of healthy person and healthy person in their own internal selves. Can two, so the first question is if one pillar is healthy, but the other isn't,
Mm,
can the healthy person help the other person heal or make them heal or any word that you choose?
mm,
Or can that only be done for that person if they were to then be by themselves for some time? Can
mm,
healing as an individual happen within a relationship, or can it only be done on your own? Because I think there's a lot of language in the space of you have to strip away everything and isolate and be by
mm,
yourself. And that's
mm,
the only way you can know yourself and the only way that you can heal.
mm.
What are your thoughts there? Is that the case or not?
I don't think so personally, because I think, well, one person can't make another person heal if they don't want to. However, if that person is open and receptive and that's what they want, I think there is definitely scope there. For me, I think for that to work in a healthy way in itself, the person who is maybe more secure, maybe more conscious, maybe, with less issues, for me, the best thing that they could do is to be that role model. So it's not about you need to do this, you should try this will help you. It's showing that person what is possible through living what they say. So for example, yeah, let me try and think of an example. Okay, so for example, the question of boundaries is a big one. It's not only setting boundaries, but it's also allowing other people's boundaries without adding guilt into the mix, not using it as a way to control another person. When I was growing up, there were there were boundaries, but a lot of the time they weren't clear and they were broken with guilt. So it would be, for example, I'd say, so let's say as a kid, I needed my mom to drive me to a friend's house. And I would say, like, okay, mom, I need to go to my friend's house. Can you please drive me? I know it's late. And then my mom would be like, yeah, Lauren, it's late. And I'd be like, oh, but please, mom, I really need to go there. So I'm guilt tripping her. And then she'd be like, okay, fine, I'll take you. And then she kind of slammed the door and grabbing the keys and fine, come on, then I'll take you. So then instead of her saying no and sticking to her no, she said yes, but then made me feel guilty in return about this. So it was really just an exchange of guilt. The first time that I really learned about healthy boundaries was when I lived in Germany. And Germans have a tendency at times to be quite direct and they just say things as they are. And I hadn't been surrounded by this before. So I moved into a flat with my new German flatmate. And I remember one evening I said to her, I'd not lived there for long and I was feeling very insecure and unsure of myself. And I built up the courage to say, hey, Catherine, do you want to go to the cinema or something tonight? And she just said, oh, no, thank you. And I was this close to crying because I'm like, oh my, what? No. And she saw my face and she was like, no, no, no. Like, she's like, I would like to go, another time, but I'm busy tonight or I'm tired or I just don't want to tonight. So it's a no. And it kind of blew my mind that you're allowed to just say no, thank you. No explanation, no guilt. So I learned a lot from her because she had very healthy ways of communicating what was okay for her and what wasn't okay. So that in the future, I could do this too. So if somebody said to me, hey, Lauren, do you want to, go and have a beer in the park? And if I didn't want to that day, I don't have to make excuses. I don't have to justify myself. I don't have to. get into an argument. I don't have to be passive aggressive. I can just say, it's a really lovely offer. Thank you for thinking of me, but I don't want to today.
Yeah, that's so important. That's
So
so important. Go on. Did you have more to say there?
just to say that, but at no point did she tell me, Lauren, you shouldn't react like this, or if you want to do this, you should do this, you need to say this. She was just herself and peaceful and happy with this. And I want to be peaceful and happy too. So she showed me what was possible. And I think that's really powerful, showing people what is possible, not telling them what is possible.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge for any relationship, whether it
Mm,
is romantic, whether it is mother-daughter, mother-son, father-son,
mm,
father, any of the, just being a healthy communicator is the
mm-hmm,
best thing that you could do for others as well. And
yeah.
I have that experience with a lot of people. I say what I mean, I'll
Mm-hmm.
say it, and I'll consider someone's feelings. I don't go around trying to be direct, absolutely abrasive, but people aren't used to people saying what they mean and
Mm,
meaning what they say.
mm.
As someone who perhaps practices that now these days and had the experience yourself on the other side, that's such a foreign thing to people.
I, Zach, I'm not joking. I was in a group coaching session the other day, and one lady, she had some challenges with a particular man who basically wasn't respecting her boundaries, but she also wasn't communicating her boundaries clear. So there's a two-way problem. And when we explored what she could say to this person, basically this person was trying to be more involved in her life than she wanted. They were more acquaintances at this point. So when we were exploring ways that she could say to him, like, I don't want you in my life, basically. So one option was to say, look, like, thank you for sharing your problems with me. Um, I can't help you at the moment, but I wish you all the best. She was horrified. She was like, no, I can't just say this. That's like telling him, just F off and have a nice life. But for me, I was like, there could be nothing more respectful than I acknowledge that you're going through a difficult time. I'm not able to help or willing to help, and that is it. But
Yeah,
this is
and
unfamiliar for her.
yeah, and you really nailed it in that that's the kindest thing that she could do.
Mm,
People
mm,
are so caught up on not seeming like they're mean or seeming like they're going to
yeah,
say do something bad to someone
yeah.
that actually creates the behavior that is the meanest or unkindest to
Mm,
someone. Because
mm,
the worst thing that you could do is leave someone in this kind of purgatory state
mm,
of not knowing
mm,
where are we, what does this person want,
mm,
what's going on. Like, no, give the
yeah.
person the closure, give that person the comprehension of I am here, because
Mm-hmm,
someone can only act on the information that you provide them.
mm-hmm,
And so people get so caught up in like, hey, they're not, they're not in this
mm,
relationship, whatever type of relationship it is, the way they're not showing up how I want it to be or how I need it to
mm,
be or where my boundaries are. Okay, well, how could they? You're
mm,
so unclear or haven't said anything, or oftentimes have even given indication that you want the contrary of what you're saying you want now, and it's a mess.
mm, mm-hmm, mm.
It's insane.
Another thing that was interesting was not, so you're absolutely right. One big part of it was I don't want to be a bad person. I don't want to let them down in some way, even though he's nothing to do with her. The other thing that I was surprised to learn was that she was really afraid of um what's the word? Like the consequences that he would take it really badly and would want to come and get his revenge on some level or would kind of punish her on some level. So not that he'd indicated this, but she had this fear within her. We haven't fully explored yet where that comes from, but I can imagine that in our childhood on some level, parents, they've got a lot going on and it's easy to get stressed, and you get a child asserting what is a boundary for them. that child gets punished, if they say, I don't want to finish all of my dinner today, the parent, you will finish your dinner today, otherwise you'll get a clip round their ear hole. That's what we say in the UK. And that child, they grow up to learn, like, if I assert my boundaries, I'll be punished in some way. I'll be shouted at. I might even be slapped. Not like hit, but a slap on some level. But that creates a fear in a child.
Yeah.
And we internalize this and we grow up as adults thinking, well, yeah, I don't want that person to make me feel guilty. I don't want to feel bad. I'm a good person and I don't want to get punished for this. And that's where all the troubles start.
Yeah, that's a very important point to bring to the discussion because hurt people hurt people. The
Exactly.
cycle of trauma creates more trauma. And like we were saying, yes, it can seem like it is the unhealthy or a mean behavior to leave someone in the dark,
Mm,
but that person may genuinely struggle or not be able to communicate
yeah.
because they may have learned that that's not a safe thing to do. Perhaps, like you said, they experience a scenario where it's unsafe or even dangerous to
Mm,
communicate. And so, how can you expect that person to communicate? Because they might genuinely be fearful at a conscious or subconscious
yeah.
level of what might happen. And, especially for women, if they grew up in a household with an aggressive
Mm,
father in an unhealthy
mm,
regards, or just, have experienced unhealthy, male aggression
mm,
there's a lot of messed up men out there that
mm,
create an unsafe environment for women.
yeah.
I understand why a woman might feel unsafe being clear,
Mm,
putting her foot down where
mm,
she needs to, because hopefully you're not talking to a feral psychopath who is going to then take their revenge and
yeah.
dangerous. You shouldn't be talking to them in the first place. Hopefully your internal radar for that kind of man and your logic is good enough that you don't get involved in any capacity with such a man, but they are out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand why someone, and it goes the other way as well. There's a lot of women that will
Yep.
feral psychopaths and will ruin your life as well as a man
Yep.
if she,
Out of spite.
not even if you wrong her, but if she feels wronged or slighted in any way. So that's why a lot of men out there are like, whoa, I can't tell her, like, no, I don't want to see you anymore because she's going to go crazy, key my car and smash my windows or something worse. I have to just kind of like purgatory ghost her. Like there's
Because it
some,
feels safer.
yeah,
But that's the thing with boundaries. I think there's a lot of talk today, like you need to set your boundaries, you have to assert your boundaries. But we've got to respect other people's boundaries. We've got to allow people to say no and to respect their decision. And I see that happening so much when people are dating. Everybody thinks, well, I like you, therefore you should like me back. And I don't like you, and you should get over it. But that applies to everybody. We all have the right to connect with who we connect with and to not connect with who we don't want to, and to say that. But there are so many times when I see it where people don't respect other people's no. There's a guy, he clearly doesn't feel the same way as you. Stop obsessing and allow him his right to not like you. Because we all have the right. If you don't like somebody, that's okay. If you do, that's okay too. Hopefully, at some point, it will align. Um, yeah, but allow the no.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of craziness going on.
So much.
Do you have any thoughts towards children in relationships? And this
Mm.
might not be an area that you get into yourself, but
Mhm.
how does either the desire for children or when there is already children kind of affect a relationship?
So I think they're two very different things. When somebody wants to have children and yeah, it turns into a heavyweight that just in manifestation, the more you want something, the further away you get from it because you're putting this pressure on it in an I don't know how it works, but on an energetic level, you see a woman and she really, really wants to have a baby. But what she really wants is not just to have a child. She wants to have that family unit, that loving family unit. But as far as she's concerned, I want to have that baby with somebody, and that can cause all kinds of problems later on down the line. So either they're putting too much pressure on the dating process, that this person that I'm going on a date with, I have to know if he wants to have children and get married too. That's just too much pressure on one person on one date, and that generally pushes that man further away. And this man might actually be very open to having children and getting married, but presented with that kind of intensity early on, it's too much for a lot of men, I think. And if it was the other way around, I think it would be too much for a lot of women as well. Also, that the almost desperation, if it's a desperate feeling of wanting to have children, it can drive you towards having children with the wrong person because you want to do it. There's that feeling, what if time runs out? So I get that. There's a time pressure on it. And I think it's trying to shift into that healthy mindset of knowing what you want and being open about it, but really letting go of that desperate energy that goes with it. So thinking more a strong determination in place of desperation. It just shifts something where it just opens up a pathway instead of a pressure that creates a block.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Now, we talked about how our childhood experiences can form our either healthy or unhealthy behaviors or attitudes or tendencies within relationships and in regards to self-love.
Mm-hmm.
What can a parent do or parents as a unit do to foster a healthy sense of self-love and our concept of relationships in their children?
Mm. So I think what parents can do to foster self-love in their children is you've got to model it. You've got to be very mindful of the way that you talk to yourself, because kids, they're just listening and watching. They're sponges absorbing everything. So be very mindful of how you're speaking to yourself, how you're treating yourself, how you're treating your partner, how you're speaking to your partner, and taking the time to help a child process their emotions. So really listening to them, helping them to understand what they're going through, letting them know that it's all okay. If they're facing one particular challenge, here's, exploring with them different ways that they could handle it. But I think ultimately, helping that child to build up trust within themselves that they are able to cope with life's challenges. Because at the end of the day, there will be challenges, and it's not only down to two parents. Because they're going to go to school and they're going to be around their teachers and they're going to go to their friend's house and they're going to pick up from how their friends' parents treat each other. So I think it's really working closely with that. It's communication. You said it earlier, communication is key. How do they see the world? Is there another way to help them see the world differently if it becomes clear that they're not viewing it in a very positive way? Because for some kids, the world's a bit too much.
Yeah.
My friend, so this is my friend in Germany again. She's such a good mom, and her son is a very sensitive little soul. So he needs a lot of love and attention and time and care to help him really understand and processing what it is that what he's feeling, because he's a very empathic person, very hypersensitive little kid. And she's so good at this, but when he goes to play school, he's with teachers who are stressed like that. Teachers got like kids running around. And there was one incident where he was picking his nose in the class. And I've been a teacher myself in the past. I was a teacher, I taught 18 little kids. And you see a kid picking their nose, and he's like, stop picking your nose. And she was able to have that conversation with him to really understand what was going wrong, because he got told off and he got really upset by this. And from his point of view, he's got an uncomfortable feeling in his nose that he needs to scratch. The teacher's telling him off. He wants to try and explain. He's not allowed to, but he's being made to feel bad for a very human urge. I've got a bogey in my nose and I need to scratch it or get it out. But then he And the teacher doesn't mean this, but in that moment, he's made to feel very wrong for just enacting a human urge in that moment. So, what my friend had to do with him is to help him understand you're not wrong for wanting to do what you did. It's perfectly okay in that moment. The teacher, although it feels like the teacher might not like you in that moment, she has her own experience going on where it's difficult for her to manage lots of children. So, in that way, he's learning. There's nothing wrong with him. He isn't the cause of that person's anger, that she has her own world going on as well. Because I think sometimes it's so easy for us to internalize things and think like, I'm the cause of other people's happiness. I'm the cause of other people's anger. I'm the cause of other people's pain, where it's not true. Everybody else has got their own thing going on.
Yeah. And so I suppose the two core tenets in that are one, modeling the healthy behavior that you'd like to see or that
Yeah.
are just objectively healthy. And
Yeah.
then two, allowing that child to be an actual human. And
Yes.
that gets into a whole parenting conversation in that how children are often kind of looked at or viewed or treated as just like inconveniences or just like
Mm,
some, robot or some pet that like,
mm.
all right, that they're alive, they're fine, brush them aside. I gotta get back to whatever I'm doing. And
Or that they're a mini adult that knows everything. They're not a mini adult. They're a child. They don't know so much.
they don't know anything.
They don't know most things, but yet they've got a deep and rich inner world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're into like you think of like Anne Frank, the Diary of Anne Franks. I think she was what 12 or 13 when she wrote her diaries. And
Well,
at this
that's a whole.
point, there's that opinion though that little girls or young boys they don't have an inner world. They don't. But she so deeply thought about the world and relationships and what she wants to get from the world and what is the meaning of life and pain and joy. And suddenly, actually young people, there is so much to them, so much processing going on that as adults who have been there before them, I think it's our responsibility to help them process better than what we were able to. What were your thoughts though? What were you going to say? I'm curious.
Well, there's some interesting information regarding the legitimacy of Anne Frank's diary and if that was
Is
actually
there?
something written by a young girl named Anne Frank when it was said to be written, or if it was actually written in a ballpoint pen that wasn't actually even invented then. And a lot of interesting things there. History is,
Oh, well, you've just blown my whole theory.
yeah, much of what goes on in history is not necessarily as it's been written, but,
Yeah.
you know, a rabbit hole for another day.
But I think
But
at
for the
least we can look
example's
at,
sake, yeah.
yeah, but I think we can at least look at ourselves because I remember being a kid and I had many moments of confusion where I was thinking, like I'm getting told off for something and genuinely I can't understand why. And nobody's explaining to me what really is going on. And you misinterpret so many things and you come to so many wrong conclusions that you carry on into adulthood, which then causes problems in your relationship because you assume that that's how things work, but you didn't realize that no, that's just your unhealed, unhealthy parents playing out their patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the actionable, take home, of course. And so you work with women,
Hmm.
and let's say a woman hears this conversation or just is in themselves realizing, hey, my self-love is not in a healthy state.
Mm,
My relationships that I'm attracting or existing within, they're not healthy. Something in them is just not quite, as it is meant to be.
mm-hmm.
What would you recommend as like the first steps? Like what is it that are like overarching like things that a woman could start with to
Yeah.
kind of try to heal internally like that?
I think number one, stop fighting it and start accepting that that is the reality of how you feel. So if you're not feeling great in yourself, stop fighting it by trying to find something outside of yourself to make yourself feel better. So whether that's shopping or makeup or drinking or going out, it's that acceptance that I don't feel good about myself and I don't feel happy in my life at the moment. Because until you acknowledge that there's a problem, you can't do anything about it. So, step one, stop fighting it, start accepting that that's how you feel. And step three, that's really important, is validation, validating yourself. That if you're finding something challenging, that it's okay that you're finding that challenging, and that given the situation, that maybe it makes sense that that is challenging for you. So let's say that you're feeling like confused because it seems as though on paper everything should be good and right with your life, but it isn't, and that you're really missing that deep connection with another person on a romantic level. It's okay that you're feeling this. Admit it to yourself, acknowledge it to yourself. And then the steps to take would be to, really get expert help. So whether that's working with a coach, whether that's counseling or a therapist, but somebody who's been there before you that can guide you and help you to understand what it is that you're feeling, why you might be feeling this, and then what it is that you can do about it. I think there's a big temptation for everybody to try and figure everything out by themselves. There are so many books, so many podcasts, so many YouTube videos, but sometimes you need that person to reflect things back to you and to let you know that it's okay, and to give you that space where you can not just read about what's going on with you, but where you can take action within that session that you have with another person to start feeling better about yourself.
Absolutely. And how urgent is it to start right now? And I say that because it might be something that someone or a woman, because you work with women, recognizes, hey, I have some work I need to do,
Mm.
but I'll do it later. I'm just, quote, having fun now. I don't want to deal with all that right now. I'm busy, or I'll do this. No, no, no. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and I'll heal later.
Mm.
Urgent is it to do it right now? Is it possible, if a woman has that recognition
Mhm.
but continues to operate unhealthily, can they get to a point of damage internally that they possibly can't come back from?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, can it get so bad that they can never come? I mean, probably, to be honest. I think that would be a very rare and very extreme example. But in terms of should I wait? Can I keep putting it off? I mean, you can keep putting it off, and you can, but if you don't do something about it, the universe will step in and do it for you. That is just how it works, because you can't kid yourself. If you know, like, there's some part of you that knows deep down that there's something going on that needs to be resolved, there's only so long that you can kid yourself. So either you take a proactive stance in this and you do something about it. Otherwise, the universe will create something that will happen for you. So whether that's a breakdown at work, whether that's you losing your job, whether that's somebody passing away, or you have an accident or something like this, something will happen that will make you have to stop and really reflect. And you'll kind of crumble, and then you'll think like, okay, now I need to put myself back together piece by piece. But it's not always a bad thing. Like, sometimes we think of suffering and avoiding suffering as the goal, but sometimes that suffering, that and that falling apart, is what makes us rich and deep humans that can really connect with other people because of the shared challenges that we've both faced. But does it have to get that bad? Do you want it to get that bad until you start feeling good about yourself? And
Yeah,
if you think that on the other side of this journey is your soulmate, do you want to meet that person 10 years down the line? Or do you want it to be next year and have nine, great holidays with your soulmate until that time, Personal choice.
yeah. The latter certainly sounds like the better option. And you nailed it in that the external is always going to be a representation of the internal.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't get our internal selves together, then we're only going to get chaos externally and bad things happening to us, or unenjoyable things, or presumably or even objectively negative things and chaos happening to us. And then it's like a compounding effect of, okay, well, now that's happened, these crazy things are happening, So
Mm.
now it's my mental health is worse and my sense of self and internal health is
Mhm.
worse. And then
Mhm.
I'm attracting even more bad things to happen. And it's really a chaotic ping pong cycle. And that's why I asked the question, is it urgent to do it now? My thing is yes,
Mm.
because the sooner you turn back from perhaps the unhealthy path that you've been on for some time, either by your own doing or that you were set out on as a young child, the sooner you turn back, well, the less deep in the woods you are, the more likely you
Mhm.
are to find your way back on. And some
Mhm.
people are so deep down that unhealthy path that the path has all but disappeared, and now they're just in the unhealthy forest. And it's really, really
Mm.
hard to get back.
It's hard to get out. Yeah,
Lost.
absolutely.
Perhaps impossible, like
Mm.
you very realistically mentioned. I think unfortunately there are men and women out there
Mm.
that have gone down such a dark path that they will not get back, at least within this lifetime.
Mm.
It's very unfortunate, but accepting and recognizing that reality
Mm.
gives the due urgency to anyone that does recognize, hey, I'm not on such a great path.
Yeah.
Turn back immediately. Turn back
Yeah.
would be my
And staying focused, what is it that you really want? Because if you really want to have that loving and healthy partnership, is the path that you're on going to take you there?
yeah.
But it's being really clear about what you want, because for some people, they want something. So it's like running a marathon. People think like, yeah, I really want to run a marathon. And it's like, okay, we'll get your shoes, we'll get you a training program. So they're like, yeah, okay, I've got my shoes, got my training program. The alarm goes off at 4:30 in the morning. No, actually, I don't want to run a marathon. I like the idea of running a marathon. So it's being realistic with yourself. Do you want the reality of that loving and healthy relationship, or are you happy daydreaming about it? Because if you want the reality, then yes, it's so urgent to take action. If you want to keep dreaming about it, then keep doing what you're doing and hit problems later on, and then that will get you on the right path. Or maybe it won't. It's a risk then.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in all action someone considers, they should consider what result that action is bringing them towards. Is that something I actually want or not? And then use that as an internal guidance and calibration.
Yeah.
And so we've established that you are a coach that works with women who are looking to do that inner healing, looking to find love in a healthy way. Can you elaborate more on if a woman were to hear this podcast and love what you've said and be interested in working with you, how would they find you? Where can they view your content? What do your kind of programs look like that, or what are they going to look like that a woman can participate in? What's the
Mm.
process of working with Lauren?
Yep. So you would find me on Facebook, Lauren Kent 28, I think. Lauren Kent 28, something like this. I've got a Facebook group as well called The Warrior Woman's Journey to Love, and I invite anybody to find me in the group that way. So just in that group alone, I go live every week to share something that's really designed to help with the healing process or a mindset shift or a belief shift. Um, I've got a workshop coming up, probably around the first week after Easter. So this is for women who are really successful at work, really successful in all other areas of their life, but love is that one area where they're unlucky. So I invite people to join this workshop as well. In terms of how I work with people, I have a 10-week coaching program that I call Single to Soulmate, 10 weeks to attract the love of your life. And within this, it's really teaching people the exact process that I went to meet my soulmate. But instead of having to do it alone and struggle alone, they've got my guidance every step of the way.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that. Lauren, we've said a lot of things today. There's been a lot of interesting perspectives thrown out, a lot of interesting things for consideration, and also a lot of actionables. But out of any of the above that we've covered, or even things that we haven't yet covered, is there anything that you'd really like for our listeners and viewers to come away from this conversation with? Is there any final message that you just really like to drive home for anyone listening?
I think just belief is, it comes down to that I think the main thing is to really hone in on belief that it is possible for you, belief that there is somebody out there for you, and that you are capable and worthy of having the kind of relationship that you want to have, even if it doesn't feel possible right now. Just knowing that it really is, and with the right support, that kind of relationship is available for everybody if they want it and commit to having it.
Absolutely. You have to believe that you are worth it, and then you have to act accordingly, because only from that inner belief that you deserve better can you then actually start to do better for yourself. And both parts are essential. It's a great thing.
And at the very least, at least believe that you can develop the belief, because that is possible. Even if you don't believe right now, you can develop the belief. It's all possible.
Love it. Love it. Great addition. Lauren, thank you very much for coming on the show.
And thank you too.
A big thank you goes out to Lauren for coming on the show. This was actually the first podcast appearance that she had ever done. So be sure to let us know in the comments what you thought about her performance and what you thought about what she had to say. Relationship episodes are some of my favorite episodes of this podcast, because if we don't have a good person or good people to share our life with, well, what is the life that we're building even worth? It's super essential to make sure that we are treating our relationships healthily and having a healthy approach to relationships in general and to the relationship that we have with ourselves. Be sure to check out Lauren's content, which will be linked in the description. And as a reminder, I am also available for consultations, including relationship consultations, at zachthehealthking.com. Be sure to stay tuned. There are plenty more episodes coming your way. You're listening to the Health King's Court. Ancient wisdom, modern health.